15 years of reviewing tech, but this Ridge one quickly became a favorite.
So this?
Oh boy, today's show is gonna be weird. If you have not yet seen the telepathy tapes, spoiler alert, we're about to break it all wide open. Humanity starts to discover crashed alien spacecrafts all around the world. Those crafts are controlled by our minds. Simultaneous to that process happening for the last 80 years, autistic kids are being born, and it's turning out that they are telepathic and they have psychic abilities. They seem to be able to not just read your mind, but it seems that they can do a lot more than that. They can communicate telepathically with each other across vast distances. They can also utilize the senses of their parents and loved ones, of their teachers, of their therapists. They can actually inhabit your senses and see through your eyes. Fuck! What if the Soviets can read our minds? Someone in our government might think, hey, we need more psychic people because there's a war coming. The coming age of AI and brain chips and Neuralink, and it starts with a V, and it's the thing that you put in yourself to keep you safe, that seems to be linked to an incredible rise in the number of... Everyone on the internet is talking about the telepathy tapes for good reason. But no one on the internet seems to be talking about the tinfoil that the telepathy tapes should be naturally bringing up in all of our minds. Tinfoil about certain things that you put in your body, maybe. Tinfoil about the government. Tinfoil about Elon Musk and various other tech companies and brain AI interfacing technologies. There's a whole can of worms in basically every direction you walk with this story. But a lot of people still haven't even heard the story yet. A lot of people have heard of the telepathy tapes, but don't actually know what it is and haven't listened to it for themselves. And unless you do listen to it for yourself, you're really not even a part of this conversation yet, because it is so fantastic and so mind-bending that you really do have to get the evidence from the source right from the start, from the words in the podcast itself. Otherwise, you're going to be operating in a weird frame of belief disbelief. So, this is going to be a breakdown of what the telepathy tapes means about us, about God, about all of humanity, as well as a dive into some of the tinfoil that is not mentioned in the telepathy tapes, and I'm not seeing anyone talking about online, about do these telepathic abilities apply to children who may have developed autism after certain medical procedures, so to speak? And could it possibly be that the government or elements in the government, in the CIA, in the defense industry, in the tech industry, could it be that they have known about this for some time? Could there be a nefarious angle? Let's see if today we can cancel Ian Carroll.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sacred we can't talk.
Our security is at stake.
So, the telepathy tapes have just been released in the last couple months here, and they are spreading across the internet like wildfire, but in a somewhat quiet way, because everyone's a little afraid to talk about them because they're a little crazy and they're a little hard to wrap your head around. And if you're talking about the telepathy tapes to someone who has not listened to this podcast, you're liable to be labeled crazy. So, here's a disclaimer. Until you've listened to all 10 episodes of season 1 of the telepathy tapes, you should probably refrain from judging any conversation about the telepathy tapes because it's really complicated. That being said, I'm going to do my best to summarize why they matter, how much evidence is in them, what they're evidence of. I'm going to spoil a lot of things, but I won't spoil some of the best, juiciest parts of the later episodes that you should really experience with your own heart and soul for yourself. And then we'll get into all the tinfoil. So, if you want to listen to the telepathy tapes, a lot of people don't even realize what that is. It is a podcast. It is not a series of raw recordings of children that are autistic saying things. It is a podcast. And if you go to YouTube and you type in telepathy tapes, you can just type that in. You could also type in season 1. You're looking for telepathy tapes season 1, the whole compilation. That'll pop up with all 10 episodes in one place. They're not all in order, so double check that. It's a little weird when you get to episode 4 and you're actually on episode 5 because it skipped. And start at the beginning. Start at episode 1, season 1, right there. Because Kai Dickens is a filmmaker that stumbled across this story by accident. She was doing other stuff, and then she caught wind of this woman named Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell. She started listening to her speaking on a podcast about her research into telepathy, and it piqued her interest. And Kai Dickens had no background in telepathy or paranormal stuff or any of these things before this. And so she naturally walks her way in slowly as a skeptic, exploring why the evidence stands up and why we should take this seriously and how you can trust the data. And she went to great pains to make sure that she could trust the data. And you should all walk through that experience with her in episodes 1 and 2, because the data is fucking insane. And it's going to be really hard for you to take this seriously if you don't understand the standard, the level of scientific rigor that's going into some of these tests. Not all of them by any means, but some of them. So here is Kai Dickens' introduction to Dr. Powell, a little bit about Dr. Powell, and a little bit about how this whole series came to be.
I had never heard of something like telepathy being talked about from a neuroscientist. And I went back to the intro just to learn a little bit more about Dr. Powell's background.
I applied to medical school and went to Johns Hopkins. And while there, I continued to do neuroscience research and work with some of the greatest minds in neuroscience. And instead of staying on to Hopkins for faculty, I joined the faculty at Harvard.
So, as much as someone can be, she's a legitimate academic. And she goes on to talk about her background in research. She started by studying savant skills. For a quick refresher, savants have exceptional aptitude in something like math or language or art without having any formal training or exposure to the skill. So, like someone who can play piano expertly without one lesson, or someone who has a brain injury and suddenly understands calculus. So Dr. Diane Powell is studying savant skills in autistic children. And somewhere along the way, enough parents had said, look, I'm actually not sure if they are a savant. I think they might just be reading my mind. Dr. Powell's primary subjects are non-speakers who are usually diagnosed with autism. Her subjects to date communicate by pointing to a letterboard or typing into an iPad or some sort of other speaking device. She explained doing experiments with some of these non-speakers where she'll put them in a room and put the parent or teacher or whoever they're telepathic with in another room or on the other side of a partition. Then Dr. Powell will generate random numbers or random pictures, and the non-speaker will try to type out what they believe the parent or their teacher or whoever is looking at from the other side of the room. And here's the host, Suzanne Scully, asking her how accurate the children were.
And if the time that they are correct is statistically significant.
Oh, it's like over 95%.
Over 95% of the time?
Yes.
So, important, critical piece of understanding about autistic people for us to build at the start here is, how do autistic people's bodies work and how are they able to communicate with us? Because understanding a little bit of background about this is critical to understanding how we're now saying that autistic people are all telepathic and can read your mind and each other's minds and can communicate across vast distances instantaneously and can access the entire library of human knowledge, apparently, at will. Yes, those are the claims that are not just claimed, but evidenced in the telepathy tapes. And in order for us to get there, we really need to back up a second and show you a little bit about how autistic people's bodies work and how their communication works, etc. So, if you go to the telepathytapes.com, you'll be greeted with Kai's cute pink tape. And on the telepathytapes.com, there's lots of resources. And behind a $10 paywall, there are videos of many of the tests. Some people call Kai a grifter for putting these things behind a paywall. I don't agree with that. I think that it is a perfectly legitimate way to crowdfund her research, and that the tests that are on the website are an awesome thank you and way to give back to people that want to support their work. Do not be under the impression that you're going to receive an archive of thousands of videos of all the hours of all the tests she's ever done. That is not what is behind the paywall. What is behind the paywall are short snippets of tests that just give you visuals of what's going on throughout the story and help you to understand what we're talking about here. And it is really cool. But you should think about the $10 paywall as a donation to the project of producing this documentary, so that it is not theoretically paid for by big money that wants to control the narrative. We'll get to that later. So autistic people, in general, they are a soul that is tethered within a body that does not respond to their commands. Their brain is at these much higher wavelength frequency worlds, whatever, we don't know, inside of a body that they mostly do not have control over, which is why they have all these tics and these stims and these like inability to control their body. And some autistic people have more control over their body than others, and that is related to who can speak in some words and who can't speak at all, and there's a whole spectrum there. And it's probably not all the same thing. I'm certainly no expert on autism. But to get a picture, here is a boy with a more severe, non-controllable body, sort of a situation, but an extremely lucid soul. And his words are shared extensively throughout the podcast, and you're going to grow to love him throughout that podcast. This is John Paul.
I'm going to generate another one. Okay.
So you can see how his body is doing things outside of his own control, but he can bring it to heel, and he can force it to be under control enough to do gross motor actions with a lot of effort, right? Imagine the amount of effort it takes you to do an extremely hard physical task. That's the kind of effort that I presume that they describe that autistic people require in order to control their body to make these kinds of gross motor movements of pointing at letters on what's called a letterboard.
3. Yeah, 3. Good job.
Takes a break. They show you the room just so you know this is part of one of the telepathy tests.
Here we go.
So we'll get to this, but in the case of the experiment, this number has been generated on the phone. John Paul has not seen it, and now he is reading his mother's mind and typing that number into his letterboard.
You're doing so good. 8 and 5. Good.
So that is a case of someone who has learned to use letterboards despite having relatively little control over their bodies. Akil, another person that you'll meet in the season 1 of the telepathy tapes, has much more control over his body, and he's able to use an iPad to type his words. Still, you can tell that he's autistic, and still you can tell that his body is not entirely his own, but it allows for a much more direct form of more rapid communication. So they've generated a random word that his mother can see, but he cannot.
Z A R D.
No.
Izzard.
Nice, Akil.
I didn't touch at all.
Good.
Izzard.
So you can see that he still does some stimming. He's got his blanket to help his body, to help like ground him in his body. Everyone that is autistic has their own things to deal with, but what we are coming to understand through their ability to communicate is that there is a whole person and way more hiding inside of these bodies, so to speak. And for the longest time, autistic people had no way of communicating. For the longest time, they were treated as though there was nothing there, and they were dead inside, and they couldn't communicate. They didn't have thoughts. They weren't intelligent, and they were just these big walking problems, essentially. And at some point, someone discovered that if you give them a letterboard like this, they can learn to use their gross motor skills to type out words and communicate. And once that started, the floodgates opened with autistic people communicating what's going on inside of those bodies. And it was very controversial for a long time because involved in that process, there's an element of teaching them to touch the right letters. And so there's an element of guiding them to letters a little bit at the start. But once they gain, control over their systems and control over the skills, they're able to type on their own. And that controversy has long since passed. And anyone that's still trying to ride on the controversy of spelling is ill-informed or potentially subversive for reasons that we'll get into. So that's all I'm going to show from behind the vault. I would recommend that anyone that's interested, please consider supporting the podcast with that $10 donation through Kai's website, thetelepathytapes.com. It's cool that we're crowdfunding this research and that we're crowdfunding this documentary. And I don't want to give away all the juicy stuff that's behind that paywall, but it's not the whole archive of footage. She's saving a lot of that for when they make this documentary. But it is certainly a look behind the scenes. So before we get too deep in here, it's important to kind of think about how this phenomenon has emerged and how our understanding of it has emerged and why we're just hearing about it now in 2025. And the answer to that is a long, slow opening process because it took a while, hundreds of years, thousands of years, for people to realize that autistic people could communicate and to learn how to use these letter boards and then to start talking with them through these letter boards to hear what they wanted to say. And through my understanding is the 40s, 50s, mostly the 60s, 70s, and 80s primarily, parents were starting to communicate with their children, and therapists and teachers were starting to use these in small, isolated places around the country and around the world. And as they did that, they started to realize that not only were their autistic family members and friends both very much in there and very much intelligent, but they started to realize that there was something else going on. And sometimes that was an autistic person directly telling them, I can read your mind. And sometimes it was autistic people doing things that just implied that they could read their mind. And then they slowly figured it out. But when you're a family learning this about your child alone in this world, you're already very isolated because you have an autistic child and you don't merge well with society. And so as you learn, holy shit, my child can read my mind, who the hell is going to believe you? Who are you even going to tell about that? And when you do tell people about that, they're not going to be receptive to that, whether they're scientists or their friends or their family members. Until you see it firsthand, how could you possibly believe that? And so over the last 30, 40, 50 years even, parents in small pockets around our country and around the world have been realizing that their children can read their minds and much, much more. But it has stayed in these little pockets of knowledge of people that understand this, and it has not gotten out to the mainstream. But it has more and more, they have, through the internet mostly, they have met each other, they have merged, they have talked to each other, they've flown to see each other, and they have networked. And now, by the time Kai stumbled across this story, there were large networks of people that already understood this, that had already communicated. There was lots of proof. There was mountains of evidence just waiting to be exposed. And that is what the telepathy tapes is. That's what this phenomenon is right now, is we have hit critical mass where enough examples of this are way out there enough. There's enough documentation. There's enough scientists willing to do the scientific testing. And there's a hunger for truth. And Kai put it all together into this podcast that puts all the truth in one place, or at least a lot of the truth in one place, not all of it. And we'll talk about the parts that got left out in just a minute here. But so now we are being dropped this bombshell of just this massive archive of knowledge and of information that seems to be so challenging to our paradigm. But it has been developing over decades and decades as these children have emerged. And there are more and more autistic children every year for reasons that we don't understand, at all, that we'll get to later. But a brief clip about the scope of this phenomenon, how vast this all is.
I just couldn't believe that parents of non-speaking kids who don't know each other from all over the world are in on a mass conspiracy theory to trick the world into believing in telepathy. That's just impossible. These families don't know each other. In fact, most of them reaching out to Dr. Powell felt utterly alone. They weren't sure if they were the only ones in the world that this was happening to. So, from my point of view, there was something big and something real going on.
So, through the intro, Kai builds the credibility of what's going on here. She builds the scope of how many people are reporting what's going on here. And then she meets Dr. Diane Powell and starts to run some tests. And she shows through audio format and video on the website what those tests look like. And they are very much controlled. They are very much conclusive. They are very much well beyond, enough evidence that we should be studying this in greater depth, at least to just make sure that we're not missing anything here. But it's pretty obvious once you listen to episode 1 and especially episode 2 that we're on to something much, much, much bigger, and that this is beyond beyond just a suspicion, beyond just a maybe, beyond a conspiracy theory. This is clearly happening in households all around the country, all around the world. Thousands and thousands and thousands of examples, okay?
Taxes is feeling unwelcome. Now Taxes is an open door to new TurboTax stores. Meet our experts. They do your taxes, so you can walk out with confidence. Now this is Taxes.
What's that?
It's compounded hogwash.
Bet those weight loss meds ain't FDA approved.
Smells like snake oil to me. Horse, this here's the real deal. Yeehaw!
Weight loss plans for $39 per month plus med costs. Check GoodRx.
And in the first episodes, Kai focuses on the fact that they can read minds. They seem to be able to not just read your mind, read especially their parents' minds, the people that love them the most and trust them the most, because love and trust is deeply connected to this conversation. But it seems that they can do a lot more than that. They can communicate telepathically with each other across vast distances. They can also utilize the senses of their parents and loved ones, of their teachers, of their therapists. They can actually inhabit your senses and see through your eyes. This is shown by a test where one of the girls is being given colored popsicle sticks, and she's trying to place them into different colored piles of colored popsicle sticks. And you could conceive that there's like some spatial reasoning where she's hearing her mom's thoughts about whether the popsicle stick is going into the right pile, but it's pretty obvious when you watch the test and listen to how it is done that she is just going directly from popsicle stick to pile, popsicle stick to pile, popsicle stick to pile, with one problem where a pile is like wrong for her body's posture and she can't control her body well enough to reach across her body and put it in the right pile, and then she readjusts her body so that she can put the popsicle. She clearly is seeing through a very thorough blindfold to just know what colors sticks are in her hand and what color sticks are on the table in front of her. And they go through test after test after test with random word generators, random number generators, with popsicle sticks and colors, with ideas, with like opening a book to a random page and pointing at a random word, books that the child has never even seen before. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. Just episode 1 is enough to completely flip the entire scientific paradigm of materialism on its head. And oh boy, just wait until you get to episode 9. But even so, in episode 1, Dr. Powell lays out in clear and pretty harsh language how even this level of evidence, the scientific community is set up to not accept.
And here's Diane Powell telling me she was good, but none of the tests that we did today would be accepted by her scientific peers. And I felt crestfallen and confused. We were so careful. There was no cheating. Every mirror was covered. All the glass was covered. Mia was never even looking in the direction of the cues. We tested the blindfolds. We had partitions. People were looking at this from every angle. We had 5 cameras. Everyone in that room saw with their own eyes that Mia consistently, somehow, could read her mother's mind. Even Jeff Tarrant, the QEEG guy, said, "I've never seen anything like this." I couldn't understand what Dr. Powell was telling me, that all the tests we'd done over the past few days would be thrown out by science. And we will get into that. We'll get into why that is. But at that moment, I looked at Dr. Powell and said, who could be better than this? And she said I should go test one of the children she tested before. She suggested that I go meet a boy named Akil and his mother, Manisha.
And Akil is the boy that you saw tapping on the iPad earlier that opens the story up to the next level. Not just reading of minds, not just how do these tests work, but what else can these children do? And in episode 2, when Kai starts talking to Manisha, Akil's mom, and to Akil, you learn that Akil can do a lot more than just read minds. He can travel. So one example that they give is that Akil's mom went grocery shopping, and Akil knew everything that she had bought, and he knew what stores she had visited. And it becomes apparent throughout the episode and throughout the whole story that many, if not all, of these people can literally inhabit your sensory world, can literally coexist within your consciousness and see what you're seeing and read what you're reading and hear what you're hearing if they choose to. And it sounds like they can only do this when there is a space of love and when there's a space of acceptance and there's a space of good, positive energy. It sounds like negative energy greatly disrupts their ability to do this, because it sounds like, and we'll get into evidence of this from the CIA later as well, but it's well documented in this season too, that emotional energy, that love is at the core of all of these abilities. It's not an intellectual ability, it's a spiritual ability. And it sounds like spiritual blockages, emotional blockages, and emotional intensities are what either open the door to these abilities or close the door to these abilities, both in autistic people as well as in regular people too. So we meet this family of a mom named Katie and her son named Houston. And we will get into the book that Katie wrote shortly. He becomes a big part of the telepathy tape storyline, and he's a big part of what's not being talked about. And Houston drops a really interesting insight about stones and crystals and rocks.
Wow, Houston, this is incredible. I asked Katie how his passion for collecting stones started.
A friend of mine gave me 3 stones, and when she gave them to me, she said she had prayed over them. So this was very strange to me. I'm an evangelical Christian, and this was just not part of my practice in my faith. So I really didn't know what to make of this. I took them home, and I was in my bathroom, and I heard the bedroom door slam open, and then the bathroom door slammed open, and Houston started shouting, "Stones, stones, stones," and he wouldn't stop. And so I just was like, "Here, take them." I mean, I didn't know what to do with them. So anyway, I went into his room a little bit later, and he had lined these 3 stones up on his bedside table on the very edge, and he was lying on the very edge of his bed as close as he could get to these stones. I was completely baffled by the scene, and I said to him, "Houston, what's all this?" He sat straight up, and he started spelling, "When you're autistic, you're a magnet for all energy, good and bad. These stones have good energy. I need more good energy."
So, this is where what's in the telepathy tapes is more than just a narrative. It's more than just a story. It's a bunch of data that is not necessarily obvious how to interpret. That story, if you take it at face value and you suspend disbelief and you listen to all the tapes and you just listen to what's being said, that story could mean that all stones have good energy and Houston likes all stones and that he needs good energy around him, and so he surrounds himself with stones with good energy. But there is a bit in there that implies that maybe praying over those stones imparted good energy to those stones. And I think about the experiments about good energy being imparted into water and how the water crystals froze. Famous controversial study that showed that you could impart good feelings into water and it would freeze into regular crystals. And if you impart bad energy into water, it would freeze into really messed up crystals. It's possible that Houston is actually referring to that exact phenomenon in stones, exactly the way that all the trippy hippy dippies are like, "Check out my crystals, brah," which is a world that I come from. So I just found that really interesting about how many questions the telepathy tapes bring up beyond just the incredible scope of what it answers here at face value. And real quick, before we move off of this episode, I want to briefly introduce us to the concept of the Hill, which is completely mind-blowing, but also opens up a big door into what's going on here and how this whole thing is working.
He was spot on every single time. To be a part of those tests was, it was life-changing, it really was.
After all the testing, Houston took a much-needed break to relax, which gave Katie and I plenty of time to go through some of my questions. Okay, Katie, so can you tell me more about this Talk on the Hill and how you found out about it?
He calls it the Talk on the Hill, and it's where other non-speakers collaborate. You think of it like a CB radio. They all get on the same channel, so they have these essentially group conversations where they all contribute. And he said it works both ways. They teach each other. They share information. They give hope to those who are being discouraged. They pray for each other, and yes, it is telepathic. That might seem extraordinary, but if you realize that, like, phones, And computers, we don't have to be in the same room or zip code, and that's because it's electromagnetic energy.
And then Katie told a story which I was happy to hear because it validates some of the claims about the Hill.
I got a message from a mom in Utah, whom I have never met. Her son spelled out to her, "Mom, Houston is my best friend." Her 9-year-old son, whom we've never met, spelled that out. And she was like, how?
So to clarify, autistic people, apparently, can tune in to this channel at any time from anywhere, and they can all hang out in a spiritual space where they can communicate and collaborate and share information and ideas. And in that space, there are numerous examples in the telepathy tapes, as well as beyond what's included in the episodes, that clearly show people on the Hill communicating something to another person on the Hill across vast distances, and then that person that was told something sharing that information and showing that it is correct in the real world outside of telepathy that proves that they were told something in a non-physical way. And this is the thing that's so interesting about autistic people, is that for the longest time, humans have always had stories about the supernatural, about God, about ghosts, about demons, about aliens, about all these things that we seem to have a stark lack of proof of. Things that are non-physical tend to be non-provable. And all of a sudden, we have physical beings that can go in and out of the spiritual and bring back information. And that allows us to test things. That allows us to understand so much more, because you can prove that if someone received a telepathic message about something that they otherwise would have no way of knowing, and then that message turns out to be correct, suddenly you have evidence that something is going on there. And suddenly, once you can prove that this is what's happening, then you can start to take all the rest of what they say seriously. And all the rest of what they say is completely paradigm shattering. But it's really important right now to take a big detour, because there's a whole side of this story that is not being talked about, that both is not in the telepathy tapes itself, and I have not seen anyone online discussing, because everyone is probably afraid to bring it up. And it starts with a V, and it's the thing that you put in yourself to keep you safe, that seems to be linked to an incredible rise in the number of autistic children around the world. Now, a quick word from our sponsor, which is me. I am hyped because I have been absolutely dropping the ball on selling t-shirts for like the last 3 or 4 months. Because, long story, but the print processing systems that I was working with to get all the shirts out broke inexplicably, and I was too bungly to figure out how to fix it, and basically just botched shirt ordering for 4 months. And if you waited for like 2 months to get a shirt, I'm so sorry. And it should all be out there now. I've put all the orders through. It is closed. The old store is closed. New store is open, and I'm not fucking touching a thing here. It's all run by a new team that I've just started working with, that I will tell you lots more about in the coming weeks. I'm freaking hyped. These guys are total legends. They own their own company outright. They're not, they're not controlled by any big money interests. They're just regular dudes from Arkansas, and they align with my values, and they're super badass, and they crush it at making websites, selling things, sourcing products. And so this new store is up, and if you want to support me, watching, liking, and sharing videos is more than enough support. But if you want to wear some sick threads, you want to just donate a little bit to support the documentaries I'm working on, the events I'm trying to throw, the whole project. I'm trying to not be broke anymore. I think it's probably time I'm not broke anymore. Support me at the shop. We got some of the best all-time shirts, as well as a couple new ones. And I am selling Optimal Human Greens, because holy shit, I love them. I'll tell you more about them another time, but this is the tastiest greens powder I've ever drank in my life. And I was given a free sample from one of the dudes at InfoWars, and I started drinking it, and it was so dank. And I never notice effects from supplements, and so I always forget to take them, and then I just stop taking them because I'm not noticing anything. But taking Optimal Human, I noticed immediately kind of a clarity and a presence and just a little energy, like a subtle mental energy, which is super important when your job is to freeform conversate with facts and information and sources all day long. And actually, I started drinking it like a couple days before I went on Rogan, and I genuinely think that drinking Optimal Human that morning before I did Joe Rogan was why I was able to be cogent, and I'm very proud of how I did on that episode, despite the intense reactions from every side. I think it had a lot to do with my mental clarity that day, and I'm not just saying that. And that's why I drink it every fucking day, usually twice a day now. And I've got a whole bunch of them in my own pantry now. And so I'm like, that is a product that I love and want to sell. And doesn't hurt that the other leading brands of green powders have a couple fucking controversies around them that you might want to look up. AG1 controversies, because they've been bought out and big money-ified and is not even what they're claiming to be anymore. Whereas Optimal Human is tested as hell. And they test them down way more depth and granularly than most supplements get tested. And I love the product and I love the people selling it, and it's all founder owned straight to the top of this whole thing. So I couldn't be more stoked to be working with these guys, to have a shop that I won't fuck up, and we'll have new shirts coming, we'll have new orders coming, we'll have new products coming when I find ones that I believe in. And probably not just supplements. It'll be all kinds of things that I believe in. We'll be trying to promote family and founder-owned businesses on here too. I'll be migrating the spreadsheets from the old website over onto this website as well, so those resources will still be available. And you might sign up to our email list, because I am going to be giving away 2 tickets to my event this fall that is probably moving to Austin, because it got canceled in Boston. We're going to be doing it in the fall, so we're pushing the date back, and you can get entered to win 2 free tickets with airfare, with accommodation, to come and hang out with all the homies and say what's up. So all you need to do is enter your email address. There's no trick. There's no bullshit. And if you want to buy stuff, buy stuff. And if you don't want to buy stuff, I appreciate you supporting the show by watching and liking and sharing and subscribing. It means the world. I'm just a dude trying to learn what's going on, trying to share that truth with everyone else. And I'm stoked that you're here on the ride with me. There's a whole side of this story that is not being talked about, that both is not in the telepathy tapes itself, and I have not seen anyone online discussing, because everyone is probably afraid to bring it up. And it starts with a V, and it's the thing that you put in yourself to keep you safe, that seems to be linked to an incredible rise in the number of autistic children around the world. And right from the first episode all the way through the 10th, I was waiting on pins and needles to see if it would come up, and asking over and over and over, does this phenomenon apply to all people that are non-speaking with autism? Or is it only the ones that had it naturally, so to speak? Is this something that is being imparted along with the autism when you take a experimental medical procedure that may or may not cause some unforeseen side effects? Or are those kids excluded? And is it that none of the kids in this story have had one of those things and has autism because of possibly some of those things? And it's not clear from the telepathy tapes, because she completely avoids it entirely 100%. So I did a little digging and I found some answers. But before we go down this part of the rabbit hole, it's important to remember what Houston said about stones and about energy, and that autistic people are people, and that they are extremely fine-tuned to energy. And it is so important that we maintain at the top of this conversation that love is the most important part of everything, both in regular life and in this incredibly complex discussion about autistic people. And what autistic people need most, in their own words, is love and understanding and support and respect. They do not need to be made into lab rats or guinea pigs or test subjects. They do not need to be treated like some token to be flaunted around. They do not need to be turned into an idolized non-human entity that communicates with God and is only good for that purpose. Autistic people are people, and they deserve to be seen as whole people that live in this complex and unimaginable way to people that live in a normal human life. And so remember throughout this whole conversation that it's about love, and that it's never, ever, we do not want to turn them into test subjects. And I can totally empathize with Kai's decision to leave the V word out of the entire podcast, because of how that would muddy the narrative, how that would cause division and hatred and anger and bad juju. And that would only serve to harm the autistic people that this podcast is designed to serve. So I do not in any way blame Kai for leaving this part out of the conversation. I'm sure that other people feel differently. I'm not sure how everyone in the actual podcast feels about it, but I figure that I will happily dig into it aside from Kai, and I will 100% support her in her way of telling this story, and over here we can talk about the bigger picture. Because the bigger picture is that there's an awful lot of evidence that some experimental medical procedures might have a little something to do with the rise in autism. And I knew that Nicole Shanahan has particularly strong feelings about these things, and I was curious because she has an autistic daughter who was not born autistic, but developed it in her first year of life. And so I was very curious if Nicole Shanahan had spoken out publicly about this, and she had. And she had linked a post by Katie Asher, who is the mother of Houston, one of the primary subjects of the Telepathy Tapes series, and I found out is the author of a book. And she speaks a lot online about the issue and about how people should read the book. And so I bought it because I wanted to know, because it was implied that this is where these answers are by Katie's post that Nicole linked here. My son before versus after the V's. He regressed rapidly, screamed, cried, was in constant pain, lost all skills. Regarding the justice due all the children and families who have been V injured, it is for society to demand the accountability to right this wrong. I've been da-da-da-da-da. So that starts to answer our question. Houston is one of the primary subjects of the Telepathy Tapes, and he apparently was injured by a procedure. And he is telepathic. And it's very clear that he's telepathic when you listen to the episodes of the Telepathy Tapes. So at least some of the people that are receiving autism, so to speak, tragically, some of them are telepathic. But is it all of them? Spoiler. It seems like it might be. Not entirely clear. Autism is very complicated, and V injuries can be very complex, and they might present as one thing, but actually be something else. It's not just autism. There's a lot of things going on. And there's evidence within the Telepathy Tapes that seem to indicate that these telepathic abilities, these spiritual abilities, are not exclusively autistic people. It seems to be many different types of nonverbal people that can't speak, people in comas. There's a lot going on here that we don't understand yet. So I bought the Book of Heaven, but I want to support what Katie's doing, and I want to recommend that anyone that's interested should buy it. But I also want you to know what you're buying. This is not a memoir about her son's life. This is not a book entirely about her autistic boy. This book is about her whole life, and it's her memoir of all of the things that led to the birth of her son, and then how her son progressed, and then how he met, and it is largely about him. But when you first open it, the first chapters are about her upbringing and her abusive experiences in the past, and that sets the stage in a very important way for understanding the family dynamics that Houston was born into and understanding the greater storyline. And it is a tragic and beautiful story, and it's very well written. But you should understand that you're not going to get to her son Houston even being born until around page 60, and then the V thing happens around page 68, and then it's not until page 244 that they meet another autistic family, and then things really start to pick up. And so I felt very blessed that I had the intuition, I had the inspiration not to put the book down when I thought it was not about what I thought it was about, and I felt a little betrayed. I'm a very slow reader, and I was like, I don't have time to read this whole book and find out if he's even in here. But I decided to pause that and skip around and find it, and I found the places where Houston enters the story and that are critical and formative to Houston's life. And so we're going to speed through some of this because it's really interesting. And then once we've kind of established the V thing, then we're going to talk about the CIA and the DOD and the technocrats and what the hell might be going on here. But first, in their own words, when he was 8 months old, he had a series of V's, including the DATP. 5 days later, he broke out in a few little red freckles. I thought it was odd, but I didn't want to overreact. He didn't have a fever and his activity was normal. The next day, I went to get him out of his crib, and he stood holding onto the rail, and I gasped. His sweet little body was covered in those strange freckles. I picked him up and cradled him against me as I went to call the doctor. My logical mind was quite certain the doctor would know what it was and would tell me not to worry. I was just waiting to hear the diagnosis to know what to feel. It was ITP. Houston's body did not respond properly to his immunizations and had started killing off his own blood platelets. I was relieved it was not leukemia, and we followed the treatment protocol. But the nurse's phone call from when I was pregnant was never far from my mind. And then, over the next months, he started to regress, and his personality started to fade, and his motor skills started to break, and he developed autism. So, that is tragic. And when you read in their own words the story of a mother watching their child slip away from them, a child that was developing normally, and then starts to develop backwards and apparently fade away and stop making eye contact and stop wanting to be touched and stop wanting to be held, that is so sad to read. And it is a deep crime against children and against our species and against God that these things are happening. And everyone that is involved in any medications that might do something like this should be fully investigated and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's my belief. So it's really important that we remember that just because autistic people seem to have these incredible abilities does not mean that we want more autistic people. The autistic people in this book and in this storyline actually corroborate that they agree with that in multiple occasions, that if someone is developing autism, you should do what you can to not develop autism. It is not an easy life. It is not a good thing. But it is also true that autistic people are beautiful and whole and often happy, and that they don't wish they were different. They don't wish they were non-autistic, I think, for the most part, though maybe some do. They just want to be heard and seen and loved and respected. And so there's multiple things to hold at once here. And it's all based on love and respect. Love for children, love for parents, love for autistic people, love for the whole system. We are where we are, and it is what it is. And we don't want to keep making more autistic people. That is not the goal, ever. But the people that are autistic are presenting with these incredible gifts. And they're here for us now. And we should be learning from them and listening to them, because what they tell us is completely out of control. And here's a few examples. This is when Katie first met another family on page 250 that had an autistic son, John Paul, the student that I showed in the very first clip I showed that was stimming a lot and had very little body control. That's John Paul. And they met his family, and they encouraged Katie to teach her son Houston to use those letter boards so that he could start to spell out his thoughts, because he was almost 20 and she had never spoken with him. He had never given her a single word. As far as she knew, there was nothing in there, and she had completely given up hope. And that part is really sad to read. Here's John Paul's message. So John Paul speaking directly to Katie about what she should do for her son, Houston. It is life-changing, and that is an understatement. Houston needs a voice. We all do. Don't let time or money deter you. Don't let the fact that you tried a zillion interventions over the years that haven't worked make you gun-shy. This is the real deal, and it works. It is not a cure. We don't need a cure. We need a chance to live a life as who we are. I'm certain Houston is as excited for you to meet him as you will be. We are great people. We just need the same opportunities to be known that everyone gets effortlessly. I'm so glad you came and have an open mind. By the way, my mom is fabulous at this, and she should work with Houston and you. Once she started teaching Houston to spell using those letter boards, he eventually strung together his first sentence. And the first thing that he told his mom was, "I'm in here." Quote, he spelled, "I'm in here." The weight of a soul, of my son's soul, hit me like a gale wind and left me stunned, speechless. My heart and my mind didn't seem to grasp it all. It was too wonderful. Oh my gosh. Houston. Imagine going through 20 years of life thinking that your son is a vegetable and that there's nothing in there. And then finding this ability for him to communicate, and the first thing he wants to communicate is, "I'm in here." We'll get to the CIA documents in a minute. So then, once Houston developed the ability to spell out his words and his thoughts, slowly at first and then faster over time, she started to find out that he knew a lot of shit. And suddenly the question became not, are you in there? But how the hell do you know all of this stuff? So July 3rd, 2018. If you get a chance to get this book, read chapter 36, end to end. Find it online, buy it, somehow read chapter 36, end to end. I started expanding to history to make lessons. Since it was around the 4th of July, I did a lesson on the Declaration of Independence. Then, for whatever reason, I asked, what is the famous line from the Declaration? Do you know the famous line from the Declaration of Independence in its entirety, word for word? I bet most Americans do not. He spelled it out. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I sat there in shock. How do you know this? Keep going. And he did, from the beginning. I would check his work against Jefferson's long sentences. I found one error in the use of an article, but that was it. He spelled the following with Morgan watching, Morgan being another person in the room. So to clarify, he has never been taught about this stuff. Autistic children are usually being given kindergarten classes over and over and over for their entire lives. He's just been taught like colors and shapes and basic numbers and letters over and over and over and over and over. There's no reason he should know anything about the Declaration of Independence, let alone be able to recite it verbatim on the spot with no practice. Quote, this is what he spelled on the fly. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinion of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Over the next several days, he continued to write out the entire freaking document. Sometimes I would let him take a break. Barely. I was desperate to know all he knew. I was desperate to know him. Like a mother who hasn't gotten to talk to their child in 2 decades, I wouldn't let up. The Inquisition began. And so she started to just ask him questions. She stopped teaching him lessons and started just asking him questions like, how much do you know? And how do you know it? And some of the stuff he knows is crazy. Like all these questions. You don't know the answer to these questions. Name 2 people responsible for the Declaration that died on the same day. What day did they die? Do you know who she's talking about? July 4th, 1826. Who are 2 famous American people that died on July 4th, 1826? Jason, my future son-in-law, was listening and interjected, there's no way he knows that. Houston, as if to defy us all, continued spelling, unaffected by the disbelief, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Who was the oldest person who signed the Declaration of Independence? Do you know the answer to that? It was Benjamin Franklin. How old was he? 70. This goes on and on and on. And Houston, all of the answers and responses are chronicled here. And at one point, he reminds us of something that all Americans could use being reminded of. Who inspired Thomas Jefferson as he wrote the Declaration of Independence? Houston answered, John Locke. What was his philosophy of government? Houston answered, contract between the people and government. What do people give the government? Houston answered, permission to govern. Eventually, she asked, do you know any other important documents? Yes. Which ones? The Gettysburg Address. Do you know the Gettysburg Address? Because Houston, an autistic kid, does. By heart. Word for word. Having never been taught it before, probably having never seen it in his life. I asked him to spell the Gettysburg Address, and he spelled, quote, 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Katie videotaped. It took 11 minutes. I asked who wrote it and why they were fighting. He spelled Abraham Lincoln and slavery. It goes on and on and on. She asks him, how do you know all of this? And he says, internet. Spoiler alert, it's not the internet. But this is when Katie and Houston were first connecting. And this is when he was first showing what he could do to her. And she still didn't know that he could read minds, let alone all the other stuff. And so you can see in the evidence of these conversations that he was nervous to tell her what was really going on. Later on in the conversation, again, she asks, did you read or hear that story? It was on the internet. What website? Fox News. As if he's reading Fox News. Here is a small piece of evidence about autistic children not encouraging us to have more autistic children. Morgan, another person, called, and on speaker, we discussed an earlier conversation with a mom who has a newly diagnosed 2-year-old with autism. Morgan asked Houston what she should do. Houston eagerly took the pencil and spelled, she needs to go to the hospital right now so he isn't autistic. My heart broke thinking about my frightened young son 20 years earlier, realizing he was trapped. I asked if he remembered everything I tried to do to help him. He spelled, I know you tried hard for a long time and it didn't work. I asked if he knew why. No, he spelled. He starts talking about God, and that is a common theme across all of these autistic people, all of these non-speakers. They are all deeply spiritual, deeply religious, and they say they talk to God. They say God teaches them. They say that they can go to a land where God is, where they can interact with angels and spirits, where they can learn from the dead. Spoiler alert. And that all fleshes out later in future episodes of the telepathy tapes. But in this conversation, he's starting to talk about God a little bit. And he says that he wants to study psychology. And she asks, why? And he says, I want to help others hear God in their hearts. She asks, do you hear God in your heart? Yes. What does he say? He says that I have a purpose and that nothing can stop it. So keep hoping. When did you read all of this? Everyone wants to know because we only see you on YouTube. And Houston says, at night. And what that is a euphemism for is that is him not yet being comfortable saying that he is learning all of these things from what is best described as the Akashic records, as the compilation of all knowledge humans have ever had. There's stories later on in the telepathy tapes that these people can actually go and talk to the dead souls of Thomas Jefferson, or of Isaac Newton, or of Benjamin Franklin. Yes, it is like that. And yes, there is evidence that that might be what's actually happening, and you should listen to the entire season of the telepathy tapes before you make any judgment one way or another. Because it really does rewrite our entire understanding of consciousness, of the soul, of God, of spirituality, and of the physical nature of our realm, and what the meaning of our lives here might even be. And here he describes how he's afraid to tell her just what he can do and how he knows these things, and he kind of deflects the reasoning why he's afraid to tell her. So there's a lot going on here. And we've now answered the question, do the things have to do with this phenomenon? And the answer is yes. And Kai made a conscious and intentional decision to not include that discussion at all in the telepathy tapes, and that is perfectly okay as far as I'm concerned. You can have your own opinion. We'll talk about it out here, and that's fine. I really, really hope that we do not cloud the conversation with all this political hatred and bullshit and evil. It's like love and respect and kindness, please. Because we are where we are. These kids are how they are. Most of them are adults now, and they are way smarter than us, and they know way more than us. Okay, so let's just all pump the brakes and be a little more humble. And now let's talk about the tinfoil. Because what first opened my mind to the concept that maybe there's more to this reality than just the physical matter. Maybe God is real. Maybe there are other realms. Maybe time is not linear. For me, the first piece of evidence that really kind of popped that bubble was the CIA's long history of funding research into what's called remote viewing, which is where a person basically meditates and then in their mind projects their spirit or consciousness to another place and sometimes even to another timeline and observes the real world through remotely projecting their consciousness and comes back with real information like descriptions of a place or words that were said in a conversation or words that are on documents in a room on the other side of the world. If you don't know about remote viewing, look into it. It's a wild phenomenon, and the CIA thought it was so wild that they have invested tens of millions of dollars that we know of over the years into many hundreds of tests into this kind of stuff. If you search for CIA history of remote viewing on your search engine of choice, you will quickly find the first link I have here, CIA.gov reading room. This is an officially declassified report that was an evaluation done in the 90s, 1995, of all CIA remote viewing projects to date. Mostly it's focusing on Operation Stargate. Right? That's the name of it? Project Stargate? Yes, Project Stargate. As well as a couple other subsequent CIA and DIA programs. Beginning in the 1970s, it has conducted a program intended to investigate the application of one paranormal phenomenon, remote viewing, or the ability to describe locations one has not visited. There's all kinds of good juice in these documents, both about how the experiments were conducted, how statistically significant they were, how much range and room for error was involved, and some of the conclusions that were drawn. And one of the early conclusions is that evidence has not been provided that clearly demonstrates that the causes of hits, as in correct guesses, are due to the operation of paranormal phenomena. The laboratory experiments have not identified the source or origins of the remote viewing phenomenon. So they know that something's happening because they're getting more than random chance generation of correct answers, but they don't know how it's working or what's going on, is one of the early findings. Quote, the information provided was inconsistent, inaccurate with regard to specifics, and required substantial subjective interpretation. In no case had the information provided ever been used to guide the intelligence operations. Thus, remote viewing failed to produce actionable intelligence. So there's a lot of stuff going on in these documents, and there's a lot of stuff going on with remote viewing, and it's pretty clear that the CIA for a long time did not really understand what they were doing. It seems like they know a lot more about it now, and if you don't know about the Gateway Project and the Gateway tapes, that's a whole other rabbit hole for you to dig into. But in these earlier tests, they seem to be a little lost and not know exactly what's going on. But since 1986, perhaps 50 to 100 additional studies of remote viewing have been conducted. At least some of these studies represented significant attempts to address methodological problems noted in the review conducted by this panel. So they've been through lots of iterations of these tests, and they have learned a lot over the years. And one of the later conclusions is this, written by a single scientist. There is little benefit to continuing experiments designed to offer proof, since there is little more to be offered to anyone who does not accept the current collection of data. And what that means is we don't need to do any more experiments to prove that this is a possible phenomenon. What we need to do is experiments to understand what the hell it is and how it works. Because what he's saying here in the sentence is that they already have all the proof you could ever need that remote viewing is real and that it is possible, and they just need to understand it better. Because the variability in their tests seems, when you read through it and when you understand what's going on here, it seems like it's because it's an ability that can be honed, and some people are born better at it than others, and so some people are no good at it, and some people can't do it well, and so you get lots of negative tests. And then some people are super fucking good at it and can be highly accurate with this remote viewing capability. This remote viewing stuff is very tied to what the autistic people are telling us they're doing as well. Just to, tie us back in. We're going to come back around. This is particularly poignant. This is in 75. One of the apparent successes concerned the West Virginia site, in which 2 remote viewers purportedly identified an underground secret facility. One of them apparently named code words and personnel in this facility accurately enough that it set off a security investigation to determine how that information could have been leaked. Based only on the coordinates of the site, the viewer first described the above-ground terrain, then proceeded to describe details of the hidden underground site. The same viewer then claimed that he could describe a similar communist bloc site and proceeded to do so for a site in the Urals, which is the mountains over in the USSR. According to Puthoff, and Targ, the 2 reports for the West Virginia site and the report for the Urals site were identified by personnel in the sponsor organization as being substantially correct. So, I'll skip over to it. I actually, through a series of investigations, accidentally stumbled across finding the original reports of those original tests specifically, where the 2 different subjects that were told to view the West Virginia site wrote out their findings. And it's here, and it's here. And right here, on a later date, Subject 1 was asked to return to the West Virginia site with the goal of obtaining information on code words, if possible. In response, Subject 1 supplied the following information. Top of desk had papers labeled Flytrap and Minerva. File cabinet on north wall labeled Operation Pool. Third word, unreadable. Folders inside, cabinet labeled Cue Ball, 14 Ball, 4 Ball, 8 Ball, and Rack Up. Name of site vaguely seems like Hayfork or Haystack. And that is all from inside of a room in a CIA studies facility far away, having never been to this West Virginia site, only given coordinates that he should project his consciousness to. And that is the original study, the original reports of what turned into the report we just read, where they had a whole security lockdown and briefing about how the hell this information had leaked, because there's no way they should have known this. So here's some conclusions that they drew about the whole body of work that the CIA had produced about remote viewing, and some of them are pretty striking. 1, free response remote viewing, in which subjects describe a target, was much more successful than forced choice experiments, in which subjects were asked to choose from a small set of possibilities. That makes 0 fucking sense. If you give someone a multiple choice test where there's 4 options, and then the other person, you give them a describe what the location at coordinates A and B are, the chances of free describing a place that you only know the coordinates of are 1 to a billion. How could you ever know what to describe at some random coordinates, right? You would think that person would be wrong all the fucking time. Whereas if you have 4 choices, you're going to be 25% correct on average, right? But what this says is that is not the case. Trying to contain the information into a multiple choice situation is not as successful. And actually, they had more success when free describing the location, which is strong evidence that there's something going on here.
Kroger always gives you more ways to save, like low prices in every aisle. Plus, you can clip and save more with digital coupons in the app and earn fuel points to save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Discover more ways to save big. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Told you Best Buy had a great deal.
98-inch Samsung, big with no blur, plus free install.
And we avoid the Dave Cave.
What's the Dave Cave?
Robbie, you're in the Dave Cave now, baby! Whoa!
You got Robbie again. Don't engage.
I'm not taking my eyes off this TV.
Shop Best Buy for great prices on extra-large Samsung TVs with free installation.
There was a group of 6 selected individuals whose performance far exceeded that of unselected subjects. The fact that these same selected individuals consistently perform better than others under a variety of protocols provides a type of replicability that helps us substantiate the validity of the results. If methodological problems were responsible for the results, they should not have affected this group differently from the others. So there was a group of 6 people that were really good at remote viewing, and they performed exceptionally well in multiple different studies under different different circumstances with different researchers. And they're saying that that shows evidence that it is a phenomenon and it's not a fluke of one test or another test. That also explains why some tests might not show as good a result, because some people are just better at this than other people. Mass screening efforts found that about 1% of those who volunteered to be tested were consistently successful at remote viewing. This indicates that remote viewing is an ability that differs across individuals, much like athletic ability or musical talent. To just elaborate on that point. At the time, although I think this is not true anymore, I think they've figured this part out, but at the time, neither practice nor a variety of training techniques consistently worked to improve remote viewing ability. It appears that it is easier to find than to train good remote viewers. 6. Distance between the target and the subject does not seem to impact the quality of the remote viewing. Electromagnetic shielding does not appear to inhibit performance. There is compelling evidence that precognition, in which the target is selected after the subject has already given the description, is also successful. Precognition. There's evidence that they can cognate what the question is going to be. That's a whole rabbit hole. There is no evidence to support that anomalous perturbation, i.e. psychokinesis, i.e. like moving a spoon with your mind in another room, i.e. physical interaction with the environment by psychic means, there's no evidence that they saw that they could do that, apparently. Sorry, Stranger Things. I think that that's all I want to share from this specific document right now, because we could go on forever about the CIA. And when you do go into the CIA and those remote viewing studies and everything, you find a lot of very controversial figures, like Ingo Swann. You find an awful lot of Scientologists, which is kind of spooky and kind of weird. It's a whole can of worms, and it's complicated. Some of it might be fakes, a lot of it might be real. It's really hard to parse out what is what in today's day and age, let alone in the historical documentation. But one funny tidbit that came out was that Lieutenant General James Clapper was involved with the Stargate project. Mr. Potato Head looking motherfucker. He's famous for lying to Americans on the stand about multiple different things, and then signing the 51 intelligence chiefs letter about how Hunter Biden laptop was not a real story. Yeah, that's this guy, James Clapper. But he was, check your sources, check all the way to the end, and there's documentation addressed to Lieutenant General James Clapper about the Stargate project. Interesting. I also found the guy that I'm pretty sure that they made the whole movie Men Who Stare at Goats off of, Major General Albert Stubelbein. Fucking funny Wikipedia page about this dude. You should read it. It's hilarious. He was hyped on the whole situation. Let's just say that. And it's not just old documents. There is follow-up to this day. This study was published in 2023, May. And they reanalyzed all the evidence to date to a certain degree. And they applied a very important understanding that aligns with what the telepathy tapes are teaching us, and that is that emotional intelligence is extremely important for these abilities. The analysis applied to the second group produced significant remote viewing related effects corresponding to the positive influence of EI, emotional intelligence. i.e. hits in the remote viewing experiments were 19.5% predicted from emotional intelligence, with small to moderate effect sizes. So emotional intelligence is deeply tied to the ability to do these things. And just a reminder that you should check sources, because you never know what you're going to find. And I was reading their study, and I saw that they said that an entire cache of documents had been declassified, and then they gave a source, Puthoff, 1996. So I clicked on it. And it linked to this Google Scholar article, so I clicked on it, and that linked to this website, which looked kind of sketchy. It kind of looked like some conspiracy theorist, mishmash. But the words seemed official. And so I kept reading, and then in there I noticed that they cite their sources too. And I found, okay, let's just double check their sources. And in their references, they have them cited, and I just copied this whole block of text and threw it into Google, and boom, right away popped up this original report from the CIA from the Stanford Research Institute, about these original remote viewing tests that contained the documents, the maps, and all the descriptions of those original tests that had originally set Project Stargate in motion. That was cool. So just, a reminder to always dig and dig and dig and look for sources, and you'll never know what you'll find. And I think the last source that we want to talk about here is related to UAPs and to the alien stuff. And it came out last year, kind of like slow dribbled. And it's these documents about this project called Operation Kona Blue. And they were controversial. They still are. It's like maybe it's all a cover-up, maybe it's all a scam or something. It's hard to say. I always remember them because of the funny, horrible PowerPoint slides that were included in the D-Class documents. But they have some really juicy tidbits in there that apparently they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on trying to reverse engineer retrieved, crashed UFOs, so to speak. And they had a whole bunch of language in the report about what the purpose was and what they're doing that implies an awful lot of things about how alien crafts seem to work. Most notably, quote, the Consciousness Center is, the Consciousness Center is responsible for, quote, expand on remote viewing and remote communication to communicate, retrieve data, and transport across dimensional/space-time barrier. That's weird. Later on, it says one of the goals of the Consciousness Center was to study, study consciousness interactions with and control of technology, seeming to imply that alien crafts, UFOs, are controlled telepathically, controlled by some sort of psychic ability. And all those things line up perfectly with the vast majority of whistleblowers and of UAP abduction stories and all of the like, even though it's an extremely convoluted pile of psyops and shit and Lord knows what. When you start to sift through it all and try to parse what is aligning and what is more likely true than not and what's really going on here, this stuff kind of lines up. And now we've got these autistic kids that are coming out with a similar phenomenon that is in many ways corroborating a lot of what is being said in these other fields. And now we're going to ask some really weird questions. And we're just asking questions, okay? But I can't help but wonder, is this an accident? I mean, is no one going to say it like we start to discover, just assuming these things are true. And if they're not, that's fine too. You know, the evidence will parse out. But assuming these things are true, humanity starts to discover crashed alien spacecrafts all around the world. And the governments start to scoop them up and study them and reverse engineer them. And we discover that those crafts are controlled by our minds. Simultaneous to that process happening for the last 80 years, autistic kids are being born and slowly learning to communicate with their families in little, isolated pockets around the country and around the world. And it's turning out that they are telepathic and they have psychic abilities. And they're very provable. All you need to do is put a scientist in a room with them, and the scientist can pretty quickly tell, if they even want to try, that the kid is able to read minds. And that's been happening for 80 years, for who knows for how long. Probably ever since forever, I would imagine. And then suddenly, somewhere in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we start to develop more and more of these experimental therapies that are not always tested to the highest rigor, that many of them save some lives, and many of them are probably great technologies, but more and more they're profit-taking schemes. More and more they are divorced from what the actual original scientific intent of the thing was. And now they're just shielded from liability, and they're just popping them out willy-nilly, and you should be giving like 100 of them to your newborns. And they seem to be linked to an insane rise in the prevalence of autism. Something is linked to an insane rise in the prevalence of autism. And Bobby always cites some statistic that I'm going to forget that's like, it used to be 1 in 30,000 or something like that, like a hugely small number. And now it's like 1 in 50 or 1 in 32 or something like that in the state of California, which is just like And to be clear, it's not 1 in 32 are nonverbal autistic, which is the type of people we're talking about that have clear psychic abilities, but it's, clearly increasing. And if the things are in any way related to this increase in numbers, I mean, someone has to put on the tinfoil hat and ask the question, is it possible that there is some amount of intent there, possibly at the highest levels in some small secret rooms where they're not telling everyone else what they're really doing? Because just the UAP, UFO, alien technology angle, America is not the only country that is reverse engineering crafts. China is doing it. Russia is doing it. European nations are doing it. Lots of countries have crafts, allegedly, and they're reverse engineering them. And we're discovering that those crafts work through psychic control, psychic abilities. It's an arms race. And do you think it is impossible? Is it a 0% chance that someone in our government might think, hey, we need more psychic people because there's a war coming, and we at least need more psychic people to study them and to understand how it works and to understand how to induce it and to understand how to control it? I mean, that's not to mention the coming age of AI and brain chips and Neuralink and all of these, like, Elon Musk and Palantir and Peter Thiel and the whole technocratic deep state that is currently chomping at the bit of the Trump presidency to just get more and more of these, like, high-tech technocracy style ideas just built into our lives at every turn. I could imagine a number of incentives for those industries to want to study autistic people and to want to know more about how the mind works and how the consciousness works and how to create machine-brain interfaces. And none of those thoughts are good thoughts either. So, yeah. And all of that is beyond the fact that the CIA has been in a psychic war with its enemies ever since the Cold War. That was the whole point of all the documents we just looked at of Project Stargate and all these other programs, is they were thinking, fuck, what if the Soviets can read our minds? What if they can remote view our sites? How do we defend against that? How do we go on the offense? How do we utilize that? We need to understand this because this is the most powerful weaponry that the world could ever know. Right? So just that right there is an incentive structure for elements within the deep state, within the government, within the evil motherfuckers that are all about war all the time. They would be incentivized to study autistic people as well. So I'm not saying that I think that is happening. I'm saying I fucking hope that that is not happening. But it's a conversation that we should probably have, at least over here with my homies that have the tinfoil. Because if we're not the ones that are going to have it, then who's going to have that conversation? Because I know Rachel Maddow is not going to be talking about any of that on MSNBC anytime soon, assuming her show stays up. So all of that to then remind ourselves, come back to center and reground into love. It is so important that autistic people are not test subjects. They're not lab rats. I so pray that right now there are not secret facilities filled with autistic people that are being studied like lab rats. And I'm worried that that might be a thing that's happening right now. And if there are any autistic people out there, or parents of autistic people, if you could ask your autistic children and autistic family members if they are in communication with people in those situations, we would like to know, because we would like to shut that down and free those autistic people. And what we are to understand, in case you didn't know, Tyler Boyer has been putting a lot of effort into the size of his cojones. He's obviously been putting more effort into his own ball sack than into his transparency, his company, his legal threats, his investigation skills, anything else. But at least he's putting a lot of effort into his ball sack.
Conspiracy theories are entering a dangerous... Information is the oxygen of the democracy.
There's so much evidence out there that even if less than 1% is true, That would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
Doodle-loop. What's up? Shout out to Coach Colin. Shout out to Coach Colin on the intro. It's okay, Gigi. Gigi got freaked out by Coach Colin's doodle-loop. Yeah, Gigi, it's okay. We're just learning from Coach. Yeah, don't worry. There's no intruders. You're all good. We have got some spicy new developments in the financial situation around Turning Point USA. Show of hands in the chat. Have you guys caught Wolves and Finance's video yet this morning about what's going on at TPUSA? About the legal threats that are getting sent out? Threats to sue? Yeah, there's some developments in the story today. Because if you're trying to come in here and send legal threats about financial auditing of your company, if you're coming after little old YouTubers that are just looking at your finances, well, I can't think of a better reason for us to look harder at your finances and to support that exact YouTuber that you're coming after. We're going to play it on 1.25x speed. If it's too fast for y'all, we might slow it down a bit. But I want to basically just watch the whole thing segment by segment and then throw in his other clips between. So we're just going to watch it all through together and see what's going on. So welcome to the party. I hope you got a beverage. I hope you're comfy. Hope you're having a great Sunday. And here we go.
This week, I received a letter from Turning Point titled Demand to Cease and Desist Defamatory Comments.
Now a local tax expert will do your taxes for $150 all in. No catch. No matter your situation. Whether you're filing W-2s or self-employed forms, your taxes are handled. And your biggest refund is guaranteed. So get taxes off your plate and get back to the good stuff. Pay only $150 to get your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert.
This is the first
Wow, he just like totally threw his whole name up there.
Step when someone sues you for defamation. I know there are a lot of people out there making videos about Turning Point, so you should pay attention to this.
Let's note that who they have not sent a cease and desist letter to? Candace Owens. Nope, no cease and desist letter to Candace Owens. Myself? Nope, no cease and desist letter to myself. At least not that I know of. To be fair, they might try to send a cease and desist letter to me, but I don't even have a mailbox, so I don't know how they would send it. If they had sent one, I wouldn't know. So Turning Point, if you're trying to get in touch with your boy, try harder. As far as I'm aware, no cease and desist letters to Coach Colin, no cease and desist letters to Valhalla or to Baron Coleman, to anyone, as far as I'm aware.
Off to work.
Just to Wolves and Finance. And that's interesting. To be fair, he's been digging harder into the financials than just about anyone, and he's been doing more condensed, shareable financial digging than just about anyone. And that represents a specific type of threat, especially when you think about all the things that we've been talking about on these streams about the money that funded places like Liberty University, the money that funds these sorts of deep state operations. We were just drawing the parallels to the Moon Cult and how these like pseudo-religious culty kinds of organizations that are these vast, sprawling multi-conglomerates of LLCs and shells and companies and such, how that is a very important shell game of money, and money is what, you know, makes everything happen. So it's not entirely surprising that the first cease and desist letter goes out to the guy that's digging into the money. Just worth noting that they didn't send one to Candace.
They have started sending out cease and desist letters, and for some reason, they've decided to start with me. Apparently, they cannot handle the criticism from my teeny tiny YouTube channel.
Hey, come on, Zach. Your YouTube channel's not that small, bro. You're doing awesome. You've got 353,000 subscribers. You're crushing it, dude. And hopefully, we can get more subscribers for Zach right now. If you aren't already subscribed to Wolves and Finance on YouTube, right now, go open up another tab and hit that little subscribe button. Type in Wolves and Finance. Support the homie. He's doing amazing work. Go subscribe to him right now. Whether you're watching this on Twitch with us or you're watching this later on YouTube, go subscribe right now.
Showing the world the type of organization Turning Point has become under Erica Kirk. They want to send legal letters to small YouTube creators. So we're going to go through this letter. And by the way, If any of you know a good lawyer in Arizona that handles defamation cases, have them send me an email through my website, because I'm looking for a lawyer.
I don't think there are any good lawyers in Arizona because Arizona is corrupt as fuck. Arizona is a problem.
Turning Point states in the letter, Turning Point entities are not looking for litigation, rather their interest is in the truth and making sure the public record is accurate.
Whoa. Lest you be confused out there, chillins. Turning Point is not looking for litigation. Turning Point is interested in the truth and making sure that the public record is accurate. Wouldn't you know it? All that Turning Point wants is the truth. They want the truth about who shot Charlie Kirk. They want the truth about was there any co-conspirators. They want the truth about is Tyler Robinson the right guy. They're asking all the questions. All the right questions, obviously. Turning Point just wants to get to the bottom of it. Thanks, November 5. Thanks for being here. November's a good month, by the way. So let the record show that Turning Point is only interested in the truth.
So they are claiming they do not want to sue me. But I view this letter as a threat to sue, and I think any reasonable business person would do the same. A cease and desist letter is the first step towards a defamation lawsuit. I interpret this letter as Turning Point telling me to shut my mouth or they're going to sue me. I do not understand what Erica Kirk is doing. Out of the hundreds of people posting on social...
She's making a mistake. That's what she's doing. Zach, in case you weren't aware, she's fucking up, which is kind of her MO ever since she's been a CEO. She's fucking up bigly. And I don't know if this was her decision or her handler's decisions or Tyler Boyer's decisions or someone else's decisions, but it was a bad decision. Because welcome to the court of public opinion. Welcome to the internet, where we all have opinions. Just opinions, no accusations. Just opinions, by the way.
Social media about Turning Point. Why are they targeting me? Why are they so worried about what I am saying that they're sending me legal letters? I am one of the smallest YouTube channels in my market segment. Who do they think I am? I'm a working accountant with a small YouTube channel. I have no money. I have no power. I have no influence. I don't know how much money they think they're going to get.
Don't sell yourself short, Zach. You have lots of power and influence, and you're great. And we got your back. We've all got your back out here, okay? Don't think we're going to leave you hanging high and dry, bro.
From suing me. All I have is the truth. And I'm not going to stop speaking the truth because Erica Kirk doesn't like it.
Well, Turning Point's here to take that truth away from you because all they're interested in is the truth. They want to collect all that truth and stuff it away into Terrell Farnsworth's pockets where the truth belongs, where evidence belongs, where SD cards belong, where mints belong, where everything belongs in Terrell Farnsworth's back pocket. So they're here to take your truth and keep it safe, obviously, because the authorities were asking for it.
The one good thing about a lawsuit is that everything will be out in the open, and Turning Point will quickly find out that I have nothing to hide. The letter came from a lawyer named Paul Edgard Harold from South Bend, Indiana. It seems like this is Turning Point's lawyer. I looked him up, and I cannot find that he's been admitted to the State Bar of Arizona in order to practice law in Arizona. So I'm not exactly sure how he's going to sue me in Arizona, but maybe he's working with other lawyers. In the letter, they order me to, please confirm that you will publicly correct your false statements immediately. This is not what I was going to talk about this week, but Turning Point is demanding that I communicate their statements publicly. So here we go. They include a whole list of statements they claim are false that I have made in my videos about Turning Point. Now, I'm not interested in spreading false information, so I'm glad that Turning Point reached out to me because if I said something wrong, I am happy to correct it. So let us go through the statements where they have a problem. And you're going to want to hear this because some of these are wild.
Correct. They are wild. And we've got some of his clips pulled up to see what he actually said. And we'll just do a little compare.
November 16th, I posted a video called Bombshell, Did Turning Point USA Commit Fraud?
You'll notice that that video is now titled Bombshell, Did Turning Point USA Commit Fraud? Allegedly. Good move, bro.
They say these are false claims. Charlie Kirk ordered a Doe-style audit that was never conducted.
Claim 1.
These are false claims. Charlie Kirk ordered...
They're claiming that Charlie Kirk did not order a Doge-style audit that was never conducted? That's their claim? That's how they're going to open it up? When we have the official file?
Ordered a Doge-style audit that was never conducted. Here is my first problem with this letter. They do not include the actual quote that I said in the video. This is a paraphrased statement of what I said, and they are saying that the paraphrased statement is a lie. You have to tell me exactly what I said that was supposedly a lie, and they do this through the whole letter. So my request to this lawyer in future letters, because I'm assuming there's going to be more, please include the actual quote that I said so that I can respond to your accusation. But I'm going to at least try to interpret what they're saying. I spoke in my video about
the official memo that has been released that we all have. Effective immediately, Justin Strife is taking on a new elevated role with Turning Point USA as its chief operating officer. Since joining Turning Point USA in 2020, Justin has led Turning Point's fundraising division and in more recent years has been involved in some organizational operations, filling this COO role in many ways, but now officially taking on the title and expanded responsibilities. In this COO role, Justin will directly oversee development, events, finance, TPUSA Faith, media marketing, productions, asset management, distribution, Turning Point Education, Blexit, HR, and legal. Justin will also closely coordinate with Andrew Cipher on the National Field Program. In this role, I have empowered Justin, among other priorities, to engage in an organizational-wide Doge effort. Doesn't say audit, it says Doge effort. Justin will be assembling a small team to assist in this effort, which is focused on Turning Point USA, becoming more efficient, becoming more cost-effective, unifying organizational success around company-wide metrics and goals, and reshaping company culture. I expect many positive changes to come from this forthcoming initiative and Justin's expanded role. A Doge effort. Because we don't know what that means. No one knows. Who knows what a Doge effort is? I mean, Doge could be... So he's buying Dogecoin? Is he buying Dogecoin?
A memo that Charlie Kirk wrote 8 days before he was murdered. In the cease and desist letter, they say, indeed, Turning Point USA's COO announcement concerning the Doge effort never used the word audit.
No shit. That is literally their first point. We said effort, not audit. And so when we canceled the effort, not the audit, we were just... There was no effort. Defamation. Well, in my opinion, tell me if you think differently, chat, but in my opinion, that makes Turning Point look like a bitch. In my opinion, that makes Turning Point look retarded. And it actually makes Turning Point look more guilty. And it actually makes me wonder what the hell happened to the Doge effort. What exactly happened to the Doge effort, Erica? Because your husband's last official announcement within the company, it would seem, virtually his last announcement within the company, was that he wanted a little bit of Doge effort. And we're not seeing any effort. It was like he died, and then suddenly no one wanted to give any effort. You bunch of slackers? Are you a bunch of slackers, Erica? You slacking off on your Doge effort?
So this is breaking news. Turning Point's attorney has now confirmed that the Charlie Kirk memo is authentic. We now have legal confirmation this did happen. It seems like their problem with my video.
Bingo. Because remember, that was leaked. That was leaked. Once again, a leak that we were told didn't happen, that we were told Candace didn't really have, that is later confirmed by TPUSA as having been true, and that they all knew about it, apparently. One would assume that TPUSA knew about it because they're the ones that had it. But that didn't stop anyone from trying to slander Candace when she was talking about it before it was released.
Is that I called it a Doge audit, when in the memo it is written as Doge effort. So they want everyone to use the word effort and not use the word audit. This letter is...
I mean, it would be a real shame if we had a bunch of effort memes popping up all over the internet. It'd be a real shame if Erica were to do some Doge effort maybe if we were to ask Tyler Boyer to put in just a little bit of effort to making sure that they're not committing fraud, maybe just a little bit of effort to make sure that Charlie was actually killed by a 30-06 and a lone gunman instead of by, you know, the people that he personally said he was afraid were going to kill him. A little bit of effort.
Seriously hurting my head. Whatever word you use, the memo is clearly talking about an evaluation of Turning Point. But we cannot use the word audit. We have to call it an effort, or they are going to sue you. The letter goes on to say, the announcement makes clear that Turning Point USA was doing what it has always pledged to donors, ensuring it was being efficient with its funds and time and making changes to foster greater efficiencies. Moreover, Turning Point USA hires a third-party audit firm to conduct an audit every year.
Listen, Turning Point, listen, Turning Point, and all of y'all shills. Just because you're retarded doesn't mean we all have to be retarded too. We all know what he meant when he said a Doge effort. Obviously. And obviously this wasn't it. He already had an audit every year. That's not what he was talking about.
This is all just their opinion. This is how they are interpreting Charlie Kirk's memo. They think that Charlie Kirk wrote this memo, and they think it means that they do not have to do anything. How convenient. They think that Charlie Kirk wrote a memo just to tell people to keep doing business as usual. Well, my opinion, and the opinion of many other people, was that Charlie Kirk's memo meant something different.
My opinion is that y'all purport to have loved the man. One of you is his fucking wife. All the rest of you are claiming to be his best friend. And y'all out here acting like he was retarded? Like he was writing nonsense memos for no reason that meant nothing? Acting like his last dying wishes were meaningless?
On my way.
Erica is his wife. And she's out here trying to convince us that we're the assholes for saying, excuse me, Charlie's dying wishes, excuse me. Y'all look guilty as hell. Y'all look guilty as all hell. And you look guiltier and guiltier every single day. Every time something like this happens, it just makes you look guiltier, in my opinion. If I were to put some effort into my opinion, you look guilty as hell.
This is not a statement of fact, it is an opinion. This is another problem I have with this letter. Most of the statements they mention are opinions, just like this one. If you are going to accuse me of defamatory statements, they need to be facts, not opinions. If I have a fact wrong, let me know, and I will happily correct it. But I will...
They should have just written this whole thing and been like, you're an anti-Semite. This opinion's anti-Semitic, and that's against the law. This opinion's also anti-Semitic, and that's against the law. Because in America, if you weren't aware, you're actually allowed to have whatever opinion you want. It's called freedom of speech. It's the First Amendment. Freedom of thought, freedom of consciousness. Think whatever you want, except not if you're an anti-Semite. If you think that Israel or Jewish people have ever done anything bad in all of history, no matter where you got it, that is actually illegal. Just to clarify. And you're not allowed to have that opinion because that would be anti-Semitic. And then the ADL would spy on you, report you to the FBI, and tell their FBI lackeys to go and arrest you. So, welcome to 2026 in the United States of Israel. And I just wanted to clarify that difference between your opinion and being a Jew-hating anti-Semitic bigot. There's a distinction now because they have laws. So, just to clarify, you should put a little effort into distinguishing between your anti-Semitic bigotry and your opinion. And if they had accurately called Zach an anti-Semite, then maybe they'd have a leg to stand on. Maybe next time they'll wisen up and put a little more effort into their legal statements.
Will not change my opinion of this memo to whatever you want. But since it is so important for Turning Point, I have no problem with specifying that Charlie Kirk's memo used the words Doge effort, not Doge audit. The next statement is, someone at Turning Point decided not to file 990 forms. At the time I made that video, those forms were not publicly posted.
Let's really quickly take a break and go and see what exactly did he post. What exactly did he post? This is what he said about Charlie Kirk's memo. In his original video that they are claiming was evil and defamatory.
Yes, Miller.
You replace their position, you start a new audit, and you work on moving that person out of your company. Now, Tyler Boyer has responded to this allegation with this post on X.com. He says, "Made up. I haven't been COO of TPUSA for over 3 years. You're listening to people making things up." He posts a screenshot of his LinkedIn profile as evidence, showing that he was the chief operating officer of Turning Point Action since July 2022, implying that he had nothing to do with Turning Point USA or Charlie Kirk's memo. I find Tyler Boyer's post ridiculous. We were not born yesterday. To my knowledge, since Tyler Boyer's change in title in 2022, no one has held the position of COO at Turning Point USA until Charlie Kirk's memo appointing Justin Strife. And anyone who has worked in corporate America knows that if you get a title change and no one backfills your position, you still end up doing your old job. So it is still likely that Charlie Kirk's memo was attempting to minimize Tyler Boyer's influence at the company. What is even more compelling is that Tyler Boyer's post is contradicted by his own words. The Washington Post obtained a secret audio recording of Tyler Boyer. This is from late 2022, after his supposed change in title.
So if you didn't notice, this is actually not quite the right clip, but this part's spicy anyway, so we're just going to play through it.
To listen.
I'm happy to share with you the history of Turning Point USA because I've learned the whole thing from the bottom up. So you do realize you're talking to the guy that basically runs everything.
Tyler Boyer said on a secret audio recording, "I built the whole thing from the bottom up." So you do realize you are talking with the guy who basically runs everything.
Notice, he is talking specifically about Turning Point USA, not the other shell companies. And he says, you are talking with the guy who basically runs everything. This is Tyler Boyer in his own words, months after he supposedly changed his title. So which one is it, Tyler? Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Or are you just lying all the time? The Washington Post also recorded Tyler Boyer saying this.
And honestly, I have giant balls and I don't care. I'll walk in and talk to anyone. I'm a transparent piece of glass here on everything that I do and everything that I'm involved with.
In case you didn't know, Tyler Boyer has been putting a lot of effort into the size of his cojones. He's obviously been putting more effort into his own ball sack than into his transparency, his company, his legal threats, his investigation skills, anything else. But at least he's putting a lot of effort into his ball sack. You know? And you would think if he had such big balls, he'd be a little more predisposed to doing a Doge audit because, Doge and, right? But anyways.
So apparently, he has giant balls.
Okay, so now the next thing that Wolves in Finance is getting ready to talk about is these missing Form 990s. Let's see what he said about that. This is missing 8.6 million, I think.
Red flag. So Tyler Boyer is being snarky on X.com and telling people to go look at the annual financial audit. Several of the 990 forms are missing. Turning Point USA lists 4 related entities. There's Turning Point USA, Turning Point Endowment, Turning Point Action, and America's Turning Point. All different organizations do slightly different things. The Form 990 for fiscal year 2024 is posted for Turning Point USA, but it is missing for all the other 3 organizations. It looks like it was never turned in. This is a massive red flag. So Tyler Boyer is being snarky on X.com and telling people to go look at the annual financial audit, but the financial audit is missing from last year for 3 of the 4 organizations. Just to show you how strange this is, if we go back 2 years to fiscal year 2023, where we have all the financial statements, we can see that in fiscal year 2023, all 4 statements were filed on the same day on 5/15/2024. That is what normally happens. On May 15th, Turning Point would file all 4 financial statements for their organizations. But for fiscal year 2024, only 1 financial statement was filed for Turning Point USA on 5/15/2025. The other 3 are missing. This strange decision to hide their financial statements happened 4 months before Charlie Kirk was murdered. I will repeat for clarity. Someone at Turning Point decided not to file 3 of the 4 of their annual financial statements 4 months before Charlie Kirk appointed a new COO, requested a new audit, and was murdered.
Requested an effort, actually. Excuse me, Zach. He requested an effort. Okay. And obviously, they were putting all of their effort into failing at filing their financial forms, apparently. So they just didn't have a lot more effort to give to the Doge-style effort that was requested by their best friend and husband. You know, they were busy. They were busy doing other things. So, that is some of what he said about the missing 990 forms.
Those forms were posted after I made that video, and I have already made a correction about that.
And yes, those forms were posted after he made that video, which looks even sketchier. So, just to clarify, Zach makes that first video and says those things that we were just watching about how they have missing Form 990s, and that's really fucking suspicious. And that decision was made just months before Charlie was assassinated. And then miraculously, once that video goes viral, the forms appear. Weird.
The next statement is, in 2023, $650,000 may have been funneled from Turning Point USA through Turning Point Action to Turning Point PAC to evade campaign finance restrictions. They are referencing this chart from my video. They claim money actually went from Turning Point Action to Turning Point USA as a reimbursement for event expense. There was nothing nefarious about that transfer. I'm not sure they are contradicting what I am saying. According to their own statement, Turning Point USA used their own donor funds to pay for an event on behalf of Turning Point Action, freeing up Turning Point Action funds, which they then transferred to Turning Point PAC. They are saying that later, Turning Point Action reimbursed Turning Point USA for that event.
You get it? If they're saying, no, we didn't send the money to the middleman. We just paid for their event. And then they sent all the money that they would have spent on the event to the PAC. And then they later sent money back to the original organization.
But that doesn't change what I was saying. Additionally, in my video, I specifically said, again, this is not necessarily illegal if they structure their transactions correctly and utilize campaign finance loopholes, but it certainly looks unethical. That is my opinion. This money did move between the organizations. I'm allowed to have my opinion. On November
and you'll notice that he uses words like it looks like, it seems like, suspicious, not necessarily, probably, effort. He's putting in the effort, guys. He's putting in the effort.
30th, I posted a video called Explosive, More Fraud at Turning Point USA. They say these are false claims. There was more fraud at Turning Point USA. I assume they are referring to the title of the video here. They, of course, are saying that there is no fraud at Turning Point USA. The content of the video is me going over the evidence of fraud and sharing my opinion. Now, technically, a true statement would be that no one has been convicted of fraud at Turning Point USA, but whether fraud is going on right now is an opinion. This is what happens in every criminal court case. Both sides look at the facts. One side gives their opinion that they are innocent. The other side gives their opinion that they are guilty. Turning Point is looking at the financials and claiming that they are innocent. I understand that. I'm looking at the same financials and thinking they look suspicious. I did not even say in my video that they committed fraud. I think I'm very fair and...
He actually specifically said in his video that they did not commit fraud. Right about here.
They are not going to be able to continue Charlie Kirk's legacy if they are employing people who are stealing donations. The reason that people are concerned about Turning Point USA is Turning Point USA.
The busier I am, the worse I eat. Factor's delicious dinners saved my partner and me from days-old leftovers and gross frozen.
This is the intro
to
his very first
video. I am very critical of Turning Point USA. Let me start off by saying that I believe this is a good organization, and I hope that they succeed. But they are not going to be able to continue Charlie Kirk's legacy if they are employing people who are stealing donations. The reason that people are concerned about Turning Point USA's finances is because statements made by Charlie Kirk himself. This is a memo written by Charlie Kirk on September 2nd, 2025, that is only 8 days before he was murdered. In this memo, he promotes Justin Strife as the new Chief Operating Officer, or COO, and announces a new Doge-style audit. After this memo was revealed, people obviously wanted to know what were the results of the Doge-style audit. Why was Charlie Kirk concerned with the finances of Turning Point USA right before he was murdered? Here's an exchange on X.com of someone asking
What up,
that
Ruru?
question.
Welcome
Why
to the
was
chat.
Charlie about to audit the finances, and will it still be audited? This was responded to by someone from Turning Point named Tyler Boyer saying, "We audit our finances every year. They were just audited at the end of our fiscal year in July." He then goes on to say, "There is no scheming. Nonprofits have a 990 where everything is out front. No one owns anything, and our salaries are transparent. If you'd like a quick course on nonprofits, here is a good start." And then he links the accountinginsights.org website where they talk about the Form 990. Okay, number one, that response by Tyler Boyer is a little bit snarky.
A little bit snarky.
Balanced when I say, now for legal reasons, I have to say that I do not have any evidence of a crime. We would need an investigation of the books at Turning Point to know for sure. What I am saying is that there are red flags in the financials at Turning Point and a lot of questions that need to be answered. That sounds to me to be pretty fair and balanced, and the complete opposite of what they are accusing me of saying. They cannot take my statements out of context and accuse me of defamation. I have the right, as a journalist, to report on Turning Point's financials.
Honestly, sounds like they hired Brigitte Macron's lawyer. Kind of sounds like they hired Brigitte Macron's lawyer. Don't you think? Don't you think? Sue him for defamation. It's going to go great. No problem. Put some effort into the defamation case.
Their opinion that they have not committed fraud is just an opinion. My opinion is that it looks suspicious. Now, it is nice that we have this letter with their official statements, but the letter does nothing to change my suspicions. It does not address most of my questions. Instead of answering my questions, it is the precursor to a lawsuit.
And it makes us ask more questions. It makes us even more suspicious. It makes them look real fucking sketchy and super guilty. It makes them look that way. I'm sorry. That's my opinion. Sue me? I guess. First, I'm going to have to get a mailbox, though. So I'll work on getting a mailbox, Turning Point, and y'all can work on drafting up your letters to tell me to stop. But Tyler, I will have you know that in case you needed to know, Tyler, I have huge balls and I'm like totally transparent about everything, Tyler. So just saying, I just thought that the whole world needed to know that, Tyler. Right? Right?
Unless I change my statements. That does nothing to reduce my suspicions. For the sake of avoiding miscommunication, I can change the title of the video if that makes them more happy. I already changed it from More Fraud at Turning Point USA to More Fraud at Turning Point USA, allegedly. The next statement is that America's Turning Point had ghost employees. The letter explains, America's Turning Point had 80 employees in FY23 and 108 in FY24. There was, however, an inadvertent error in America's Turning Point filing, which failed to note these employees, and America's Turning Point is in the process of rectifying that inadvertent error. So I was right.
They literally just confirmed. They're like, we're going to sue you for misinformation, for defamation. Or rather, stop being defamatory or we will sue you. Because right here, you said this thing that's true and we're correcting it.
There was something wrong. They did put incorrect information on the 990 form.
Meg,
there
you
were
just
missing
calm down.
employees they were not reporting.
Calm down over there,
They
Meg.
have confirmed it. And just to be clear, this was not some minor mistake. This was around 80 employees that were somehow missing. Their complaint is that it's not correct to use the term
80 employees. Imagine if it was 80 employees that are getting paid like $100,000 a year. $80 employees getting paid $100,000 a year. That's $8 million. Poof. And some of their employees make a lot more than $100,000 a year. We're looking at you, Tyler. We're looking at Tyler Boyer. So just 80 missing employees that are not ghost employees, obviously. Are they vampire employees? Are they witch employees? Are they Illuminati employees? Are they Israeli employees? Are they Jewish? Are they what kind of employees are they, Turning Point? I mean, not ghosts? Where the fuck are they? Because that's a lot of money. And they literally just confirmed that he was correct.
ghost employees. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that opinion, but that is their position. I find this incredible. How are they going to sue me for this? They admit that I am right that the employees were not reported correctly. They don't like the wording I used. How is that defamatory?
Philadelphia employees.
The next
yeah.
statement is that donations to Turning Point Action increased from $10.7 million in FY23 to $27.2 million in FY24, and suggested that Tyler Boyer may have been recruiting these donors away from Turning Point USA to undermine MAGA and benefit himself. Again, this is not exactly what I said, and I find their paraphrasing of my statements a little silly. They are claiming that Tyler Boyer never tried to undermine Charlie Kirk in any of his decisions. Tyler Boyer never tried to benefit himself in his role at Turning Point. I find those claims a little excessive.
Well, I mean, come on, Zach. We already know that he has massive balls and he's as transparent as a glass window. He said so himself. So obviously, like, come on, man, come on. Put a little effort into not defaming the man, Tyler Boyer, right? Right? Like, just a little? Come on. He's Tyler Boyer. He would never lie. Except for that one time that he got convicted for lying about the whole election thing. Yeah, don't worry, though, because he got his sentence commuted. Or got pardoned, or whatever it was. He got pardoned, right? He got pardoned? Yeah. Yeah. But that wasn't lying. That was just like helping Trump get elected. You know?
What I actually say in my video was sharing my opinion on the financials, which I'm allowed to do. When you see Tyler Boyer's organization growing so much faster than Charlie Kirk's organization,
do you see what that is? Right? Revenue over time of Turning Point USA, and it really flatlined at 80 million for the last 3 years. And then Tyler Boyer's side of the thing, Turning Point Action, just blam.
That looks to me.
Down here he says 4% increase on Charlie Kirk's side, Turning Point USA, 150% increase on Tyler Boyer's side, Turning Point Action. Whoopsies.
Like a corporate takeover from the inside. That is my opinion, which I'm allowed to have.
Just remember the Moon Cult? Remember the Moon Cult? Remember all the shell organizations and companies, the money flowing in weird ways, being used for weird, sketchy political action in all sorts of different directions, religious takeovers, political fundraising, speaking conferences, sometimes a little bit of crime on the side. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that Tyler Boyer would ever commit a crime, except for the one that he was convicted of. But don't worry, he got pardoned. He got pardoned by the guy that he helped, right? The guy that's currently covering up the Epstein files. He got pardoned by that guy. I'm just talking about Moon, obviously, about Moon. And how he helped them smuggle drugs and fund the Contras and all sorts of other things. Tyler would never do those sorts of things, though. Never. Never, ever. Because he's got big balls.
Now, of course, I cannot know what is going on inside Tyler Boyer's mind, but that's not what I said in my video.
But Zach, you know what you can know is where it's going on? Do you know what you can know about Tyler Boyer, Zach? You don't know what's going on inside of Tyler Boyer's mind, Zach, but you know that he has big balls, Zach. Come on. Come on.
I was not speaking about his state of mind or his motivation. I do not know that. The letter goes on to explain that donors naturally direct more money towards election activities in election years, especially to organizations like Turning Point Action that can engage in lobbying and political activity during election years. Accordingly, you are wrong to assert that the increased donations to Turning Point Action evinced any sort of wrongdoing on Mr. Boyer's part. So their explanation is that all the changes in the financials can be explained by the election. That is their official explanation. I do not believe it, and that is my opinion. On December 7th, I posted a video called Top 10 Clowns of the Year.
Strong competition. Strong competition, I'll have you know.
In this video, I called Turning Point my #1 Clown of the Year. I talked about the now infamous interview with Turning Point's chief security person talking about the day that Charlie Kirk was murdered.
Who I am still not sure. I am still unclear about whether or not. Thanks, Mandana, for the subs. Appreciate it. I am still a little unclear about whether or not Brian Harpo was actually still employed by Turning Point USA when he sat down for this meeting, for this interview. I received information that seemed to imply that him and his security firm were let go after the big riot that happened at, I think, UC Berkeley, where a bunch of kids' faces got smashed in, and there was a bunch of articles. And my understanding is that was before this was filmed. I could be wrong. Maybe I need to put a little more effort into auditing my journalistic practices. But they definitely cut this boy loose hard afterwards.
I point out the massive contradiction where he says they were not allowed to fly drones. Then I show the interview with Frank Turek where he says he was watching drone footage with Charlie.
Which he wasn't. If you don't know, if you don't follow Based Sam Parker on X, Based Sam Parker has done a whole bunch. He's moved on to other things now. Where's my search? Where's my search bar? Is this? Yeah. Frank Turek. He did a whole bunch of examining of Frank Turek's phone and the reflections in Frank Turek's phone in close-up detail and showing that there's like kind of no way that what was on Frank Turek's screen, Frank Turek phone will probably hone it down more, showing that what was on Frank Turek's screen could not have been drone footage. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pick out. Yeah, it's like this kind of stuff where he's going real slow-mo. Or rather, sorry, not could not have been drone footage. Frank Turek claims that he was FaceTiming. And Sam Parker breaks it down pretty clearly that he doesn't have a reflector on his phone, probably, and he's not watching a FaceTime. But it does look like we're actually seeing like a wheel well of a car and like other stuff on there, like like people. Who knows what it is? But yeah, Based Sam Parker has been breaking all kinds of good stuff on this story, including where was it? I just saw a post from him this morning that maybe we'll get to later. I forget what it was. Oh, it was about the Rode Wireless Pro mic. It's about the audio. Right. It's about the audio. Where if Charlie Kirk's microphone exploded, which is coming to be the most logical theory at this point, that means that there's no audio after he was shot. There's no audio recording. But if he was shot by Tyler Robinson, then there is audio. Then that microphone was still recording when the shot occurred. And it would have kept recording afterwards. And they should have that recording. And if they can't produce it, that's a problem. A big problem. So definitely follow Based Sam Parker on X for more details on that. Because he's breaking it all down. He's been hot on this case.
Charlie Kirk. This part is breaking news because I'm not aware this has ever been discussed. The lawyer in this letter says the following. There was no discrepancy. UVU prohibited Turning Point USA from...
Right? Isn't that a good point? Doesn't Based Sam Parker bring up a damn good point there? That is like 100% confirmation that if the microphone exploded, there is no audio. So they should still have the audio because it didn't explode, right? It didn't explode, right? And if they could put a little effort into procuring that audio for us to prove that it was a gunshot and not an explosion from the microphone, that would be great.
Good hair days start with a routine. An easy routine starts with a daily chew. Through Hims, you can grow thicker, fuller hair in just 3 to 6 months.
That would be great. If you could send that audio to me with the cease and desist letter, I would really appreciate it, Turning Point. Please and thank you.
Flying drones for security purposes during the event, but did allow a Turning Point USA...
Here, let me rewind to the
says
beginning
the
of this.
following. There was no discrepancy. UVU prohibited Turning Point USA from flying drones for security purposes during the event, but did allow a Turning Point USA media production drone to briefly fly over the location before the event to collect limited B-roll footage. First of all, how could this be defamatory if I had no idea about any of this? Second, I find this explanation absurd.
So, before we get to the other part of this, that's breaking news right there. They've never officially confirmed that to us. And this is where people are always like, when Candace sat down with Erica and just apparently had a cordial conversation with her, a lot of people were like freaking out that she hadn't pressed her on everything. And I reminded people that the goal is just to get them to put things on the record. Because the more things that Turning Point puts on the record, the more that it does not add up. The more that we have them officially stating things that don't make any fucking sense. And if they could put a little more effort into making their claims add up, that would be great. That would be great, actually. Just a little bit of effort into the cover-up, please.
You are telling me that the security team was not allowed drones, but the media team was? That is the official explanation from Turning Point's lawyer. My honest opinion is I do not believe that.
Bullshit.
This place is dangerous.
What kind of explanation is that? And who made that decision? And where's their job? Because they should be fired.
But if that did happen, that is really silly, and it may have cost Charlie Kirk his life. On December 14th, I posted a video called Tim Pool Rants about Turning Point. They say these are false claims. Asking whether money sent to 110 LLC was to bribe Jay Kaufman. Again, that's not exactly what I said. They are complaining that I'm not allowed to ask questions. I cannot ask questions about 110 LLC. I cannot ask questions about Jay Kaufman. I think those are fair questions to ask, given that Turning Point sends them millions of dollars as one of their largest independent contractors.
And need we remind you, Turning Point, that you are funded by donations. You are a nonprofit, beholden to your donors, the American people. Right? And I just want to point out how wonderful it is, as we're watching this, to watch the view count just climb and climb and climb on his video. Because everyone's talking about this video. Everyone's posting this video. This video is fire right now, as it should be. Everyone should be sharing this video, clips from this video. Y'all should clip this video and put clips out and just spread it. Because fuck them. And this is why, right here. He's about to explain why. Fuck them.
This is America. I'm allowed to ask questions. But I think it is fair for Turning Point to also state their official position. They claim Turning Point contracts with 110 LLC for legitimate services. The money you ask about is spent on marketing and advertising services. Any claim that it is a bribe is false.
Remember 110 LLC was the company with the advertising company with the website that was not listed on Google, that you cannot find, that has no updates for years, no evidence of any services whatsoever. I don't know if you're familiar with advertising and marketing, but being listed on Google is kind of fucking important. Outreach on the internet is kind of fucking important.
The second statement is asking why America's Turning Point lists its COO, Tyler Boyer, as an independent contractor. Again, they are saying I'm not allowed to ask questions. Does Turning Point see the irony in this? Charlie Kirk died under a tent with the slogan, "Prove me wrong." His whole college campus tour was about asking questions. And now Turning Point is sending out legal letters to small YouTube channels accusing them of defamation for asking questions. I was asking the question why their COO was an independent contractor. I think that is unusual. That is my opinion. Turning Point is now stating their official position. America's Turning Point lists its COO as an independent contractor because his substantive role for America's Turning Point is more in line with a contractor classification. So this is new information. Now we know Turning Point is intentionally doing this.
And it's on the record. And it's fucking weird. I think, in my opinion, that it's a little fucking weird. I'm no expert. I'm certainly no expert. Not even as much of an expert as Zach here. Certainly not. But I think it's a little fucking weird. You know who I pay as an independent contractor? My boy Kevin, who clips my YouTube videos for me. Who takes the Twitch and clips it up and puts it on YouTube. We keep it loose. We keep it easy. That's an independent contractor. He's clipping. He's doing a lot of other cool things too. But your COO, your chief operations officer?
That's exactly the right amount of head. He says that every time. Watch this. I'm a legend.
You just died.
It's part of the strategy. It is not.
You ever notice how it smells
An independent
exactly
contractor.
the same in here? Like the carpet,
The guy,
the
remember
pizza,
his quote
dust?
on the secret recording? I built the whole organization myself. You're talking to the guy that basically runs everything. That was Tyler Boyer's words earlier. Paraphrase. An independent contractor with big balls. Obviously, he has massive testicles.
This is not a mistake. They are intentionally classifying their COO as an independent contractor, which means they are not withdrawing payroll taxes to send to the IRS. Now, if I were their CFO, I would not do this. But for some reason, their CFO, the politician Justin Olson, has determined with all of his accounting expertise that this is the best way to classify their employees. Whatever the reason, this is Turning Point's opinion about an IRS classification. It is not a statement of fact, and I'm allowed my own opinion. The letter also states, more generally, you have accused the Turning Point entities of being shell companies. This too is false. They are arguing about what can be defined as a shell company. They don't want anyone to call Turning Point's multiple organizations shell companies.
You heard it here first, folks. You're not allowed to call them shell companies. Can we call them mint companies? Can we call them mint companies, mint distributors, mint distribution organizations, perhaps? Is that allowed? Can we call them bullshit factories? Can we call them fraudulent? Maybe not that. Maybe not that. How about if instead of shell companies, we call them marine services institutions? How about we call them aquatic life distribution centers? How about if we call them beachheads for bullshit? BS Mints LLC, fraudulent companies. Fraudulent companies. Yeah, we might call them fraudulent companies. Philadelphia Mints LLC.
Personally, I do not agree that it is an incorrect use of the definition. Turning Point is moving money between organizations like some kind of shell game. A shell game is a classic street hustle and magic trick. So in my opinion, I think it would be appropriate to call them shell companies. But if Turning Point is so upset about the word shell company, I have no problem calling them something else from now on.
Solo cups. Call them solo cups. Call them mint containers. Mint condition mint containers. Whatever you want, just don't call them shell companies. Okay, you got that, Goy? You got that, peasants? Don't you say it.
On December 28th, I posted a video called Shocking, Turning Point Fraud Gets Worse. They claim you recklessly repeated many of the previously described falsehoods and again directed viewers to the home address of Mr. Boyer, which has resulted in threats to Mr. Boyer's safety.
This part's crazy, dude. This part's crazy. Remember this. They say that he directed viewers to the home address of Mr. Boyer, which has resulted in threats to Mr. Boyer's safety. Oy vey! I'm receiving threats! As they send a threat to Zach.
Let me explicitly state that I condemn any violence, any threat, any harassment being sent to any employee at Turning Point. Do not even harass them on X.com.
Maybe ask them questions on X.com. Maybe ask them about their mint factories, their fraudulent companies. Maybe ask them questions on X.com. Maybe tell some jokes on X.com. Maybe post some memes on X.com if you wish to exercise your freedom of speech rights. Maybe just a little bit of memeing. But obviously don't harass them. Definitely don't harass them in person. I'm not advocating for that. But like on X.com, I think you can pretty much use your freedom of speech. Just don't criticize Israel or else you're fucking evil.
Do not retweet at them. Do not send them angry messages. Keep your comments in my comment section. Just for the record, I will repeat what I have previously said. And I have to tell people, please.
This is from his original video right here.
Please do not go to Tyler Boyer's house. That is not appropriate. I was in no way calling for violence against Tyler Boyer, and you are absolutely false in claiming that I was. In the video, I blacked out Tyler Boyer's address, which I did not have to do. He put the address himself on a public document. That's not my fault. That's his fault. Don't blame me when I have tried to protect his privacy.
If he had put a little more effort into building his fraudulent companies, we'll say, his aquatic life distribution centers, he would have known that he could have set it up somewhere where it would have kept his address private. But he didn't. He made his address public on the public filings. But Zach was a good guy, and he blacked it out, despite it being public information.
So that is the letter. There are more paragraphs of legal language that I skipped, but that is pretty much the letter. I have to say that in general, Most of the things they brought up were nitpicky little things, like they don't want me to use the word audit or the word shell company. Those are not even facts. But I am going out of my way to adjust for some of their requests. And I want to mention something else. Take a moment and think of all the statements they listed in this letter as problematic. I think it's around 11 statements they are claiming are false.
This part's big.
Now think about all the things I've talked about in my videos on Turning Point. There are a lot of other things that I have said in my videos that were never mentioned in this letter.
There's also a lot of things that people like Candace Owens said. A lot of things that people like Baron Coleman said. It's interesting. I mean, I've never said anything. I would never say anything bad about Turning Point USA, obviously.
They did not say I got those statements wrong. I think that is very telling. Again, I have no desire to spread false information. Some of their statements in this letter were actually very helpful in answering some of our questions, so I hope that this video cleared up any confusion. I will be honest with you guys. Getting a legal letter like this is scary. I don't know why Turning Point is attacking me like this.
I do. In my opinion, it's because you're over the target. It's because, in my opinion, when you follow the money, you find the game. When you follow the money in a deep statey organization, you wind up finding the deep state at the other end of it. And they don't really want that. That's not good. When you follow the investigation, when you ask the questions, when you do a little digging, you might turn up things like Erica Kirk in a movie filmed on Fort Huachuca, where she's like an assassin or some shit. You might find Erica Kirk speaking to defense contractors on behalf of intelligence agencies years ago. You might just turn up some spooky stuff. You might even find some mints if you look hard enough. If you look hard enough, you might turn up some mints and some mint distribution organizations.
I don't have a lot of money, lawyers are expensive, and I'm going to need a good one. So I'm going to ask for help. If you like my videos, consider signing up for a membership. That is money that I would use if this turns into a lawsuit. If you want to provide additional support, you can also donate directly from the homepage of my website on wolvesandfinance.com. I really appreciate all my members. I'm so thankful for your support, especially in times like these. I'm Zach from Wolves and Finance. Thank you for watching.
Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Come on.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. Now get a savory sausage McMuffin with egg, plus hash browns, and a small coffee for just $5.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
This is the story of the one. As a lineman, it's his job to keep the power on. That's why he chooses Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so he can rise to every challenge. Call, click, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Oh, did I already send it? Daily spend limit is $500. Try again tomorrow? Is that what's going on? That's all we can send him? It's popping up at the bottom saying I can't give him more.
Feels like the lights forget we're still here.
I thought it was going to give me a confirmation.
Game over already?
Yeah.
Like when it's live, it gives you a confirmation. I guess it's because there is a chat and it goes through.
One more minute.
We had the whole day. I mean,
But,
it's not going to change it.
Let's go. Good night, champs.
It won't let me. So, everybody go support Zach. Go
Feels
help
like the lights forget we're still here.
And Zach, don't you stop speaking the truth, bro. Don't you worry. You keep asking your questions. We all got some questions. We all got some questions.
All right, sir.
And just on the topic of other things that he talked about that weren't mentioned, some that were, some that weren't, some that were, some that weren't, you know, who?
What was the $8.6 million spent on? In my opinion, what I think is happening is I think there are fake people on the payroll. I think that paychecks are getting sent to people who do not really exist. And that would explain why we have a company with zero.
Notice how he says, in my opinion, I think, and that would explain
0 employees with millions of dollars of salary expense. What?
Remember, those 80-some employees that they just forgot to put on their forms at the not shell company that had millions of dollars flowing through it? Don't worry, that is not a shell company. That's a mint distribution factory. They're turning out all these mints that Brian Harple needs in order to keep Charlie Kirk safe.
What about Tyler Boyer's argument that they have an annual financial audit every year? If what I am saying is true, why wouldn't their annual audit catch these issues? The annual financial audit for Turning Point USA, Inc. and its affiliates was performed by an accounting firm called Baker Tilly. In the notes, they explain that they audited Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, Turning Point Endowment, America's Turning Point, and TP USA Merch. That usually means they audited all the shell companies when they provided their opinion that the statements present fairly in all material respects. That means it is a clean audit with no problems.
That means that Baker Tilly is either retarded or in on the game. And if you're new to this world, if you're new to how this works, let's just say that the auditing firms tend to be a little suspicious. Usually the auditing firms are in on the game, in my opinion, allegedly. And so I think we have some questions for Baker Tilly as well. And maybe Baker Tilly should extract itself from this fucking issue and come clean. I think Baker Tilly should maybe come clean.
Personally, I think that's an unethical way to run a nonprofit, but that's just my opinion. But what is important here is what happened to the missing $8.6 million, the amount sent to America's Turning Point in fiscal year 2024. The amount of money sent to America's Turning Point was getting larger and larger, and because the financial statements are missing, we cannot tell how this money was spent. If we look at the prior year, the majority of the money was spent on other salaries and wages. How is this possible when America's Turning Point reports 0 employees?
0 employees with $8.6 million.
Released on the NASDAQ website. From 2003 to 2020, he ran Precision Payroll of America, where he turned that company into a leader in the complex, highly regulated world of human resources and payroll processing. So let's ask the payroll guy. Tom Sedeka, do you see anything strange with these payroll numbers? Now, to understand the full picture, it's not just about where the money was going to, it's also where the money was coming from. When I was going through all the new financial information, I saw this chart, and immediately, I had a good idea of what was going on. This shows revenue going into Turning Point Action, and you can see a gigantic leap in revenues for FY24. It went from $10.7 million to $27.2 million. That is over a 150% increase in 1 year, an extraordinary achievement for a nonprofit. What is even more curious is when you put this chart side by side with Turning Point USA. Turning Point USA shows a 4% increase. Remember that Turning Point USA is the main organization with Charlie Kirk as president. Charlie Kirk works a lot less on Turning Point Action, and Tyler Boyer is the COO. Do you see what is happening?
Do you see what is happening? Charlie, do you see what is happening? Because I can't help but wonder if Charlie saw what was happening. And